I am a slowly recovering Al-Anon. My name is Rick Jatuk. Good afternoon, everybody. And as they say in Nebraska, by the grace of God, a program called the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, fellowship called the Al-Anon Family Groups, and the loving but very firm guidance of a big book black belt Al-Anon sponsor. It has not been necessary for me to plan, contemplate, or attempt any kind of death, yours or mine, since the 10th day of April, 1987, and for that I am incredibly grateful. My home group is Richmond Hill Al-Anon Family Group. We meet every Tuesday night, and I live in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. The site of the 2005 International Gathering of Alcoholics Anonymous with Al-Anon participation. No matter how well we get, we still like hanging out with you guys. So 1 year from today, I hope to see all of you attendees here at the South Bay Roundup in Mildred's and mine and Lisa's and Dorothy's hometown of Toronto. Come stay at my house. Or Mildred's, one or the other. I want to thank you for inviting me back to the South Bay Roundup. I was here 6 years ago in 1998 and had a ball. Shared it with a lot of people. As a matter of fact, every talk I have given since I've been at the South Bay Roundup, I have talked about the South Bay Roundup. And I'll tell you why at the end. So stick around. I am an Al-Anon and on and on and on. I have, and this is the truth, I have never been invited back to the same event. So thank you. You either really liked what I had to say last time or you forgot that I was here. Probably the latter. I want to thank Steve for the lovely phone calls we had before I came. I want to thank you for the incredibly generous invitation to invite Lise with me. Just a pleasure to participate in this. And when I told her about South Bay, I said, it's unique. And it's more unique this time than it was 6 years ago. I'm just having an absolute ball. And I got to tell you that my profession is I'm a high school music director. And I do community music making. And when I saw that choir last night, I saw in them the same energy and the same love that music can bring out of all of us. And what a magnificent connection of recovery and music. And it touched my heart deeply. And then the people in the show afterwards, it was absolutely mind-boggling. And whoever that guy was playing the guitar, I want to meet you. So if I can ever become that free in my life, I'll be a success. It's great to see so many people here that I know. There are 3 people in this room that are in the same sponsorship family that I am in. And that is a delight. They are my sponsorship sisters. What an incredible thing that is to know that we're in this deal together. It's absolutely lovely to see them. There are people I have met out in other conferences. And an absolute delight to be with them again and share this time here with you. So thank you for the honor of being at this magnificent, absolutely magnificent convention. I've seen a lot of them, and you guys are right at the top, I'll tell you. Yeah, applaud yourself. Concept 4, just so you know, I'm going to talk about the concepts. They're locking the doors as we speak. Concept 4 says participation is the key to harmony. And if that be true, I can say this about the South Bay Roundup. You have written a symphony with the level of participation that goes on. Half of this is the program. The other half is all the people that are volunteering. It's mind-boggling. I would like you all to turn around and just thank one level of volunteers. I'm sure they'll get thanked later. But if you ever work on shows like this, and being in the kind of the job I do, we do shows, turn around and see the technical people at the back of the room and thank them for the incredible job that they are doing. It is no easy job. It's phenomenal. The video, the audio, the lighting, unbelievable what you guys are doing. Thank you. I want to let you know a little bit about what's going on in my life these days. I've been in Al-Anon now for 17 years. This is my second time through. There's a point where I was able to stand up here and tell you I was here for 16. Then I met somebody who was terrifically more exciting than anybody I'd ever met in these rooms, and I took off. Sick. 3 years later, I came crawling back to you. That's 17 years, and I wish I could say to you that my life is perfect and great and everything is going absolutely fine, and I just feel like totally everything's great. And you know what? That's just not the case. And there are still challenges in my life, and God continues to put them in my way. Every February, I do an annual inventory with my sponsor, and one of the things that comes out of that annual inventory is kind of recovery goals for the year and things I'd like to do. And one of those things I put in was I said, I think it's time for me to walk through the steps again. And so I just finished doing the step one process with reading all our stuff and answering his questions, sending it off to my sponsor. But there's a couple of things that people have been placed in my life these days that totally remind me of how absolutely powerless I am. One is in a work situation where there's a person that's actually a choral director in my school who is a stunningly talented choral director and the biggest pain in the ass I have ever met in my life. And I have to reconcile those two things. And she challenges me on a daily basis to realize how absolutely powerless I am over another human being. And I have a father who I love dearly, who for 20 years plus found sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. And for whatever reason, went out and drank again. And that hurts. Because I had developed, in my recovery in Al-Anon and his in Alcoholics Anonymous, we had developed quite a relationship. Because we can start to talk when we're in these fellowships. And it's a magnificent thing when people in the family are doing the recovery because you can talk. You can talk about more than the football game and what the stock market's doing, or, hey, how about those, who won the election. You can talk about the real deal. And ever since my dad started to drink again, I realized that I'm powerless in my head, but my heart still aches. That there was a connection that was able to happen that is unable to happen. And just last weekend, we had a party for him. It was his birthday, and it was my birthday, so we had one of these combined little deals. And when it was over, I just felt so sad that the relationship is plastic. You can talk about only a few things and go no farther because active alcoholism is back. And as my sponsor said to me, it is a disease that is cunning, powerful, baffling, and incredibly patient. Patient. So it is no accident that I am redoing step one and understanding what surrender is. That I have to let go of my control. And I love the control. Rick's design for living is very simple. You do what I want you to do, when I want you to do it, and I will be just fine. That's my design for living. And if you will only follow that, I'll be okay. And the problem is that nobody ever really does that. But there's some sick part of me that still believes you will. And that when I'm not right with my God, I have to find peace somehow, and I search for it through control. Love it. Now, control really is just a big fancy word for fear. So I'm afraid I'm not going to get what I want, so you better damn well do this. Hey, look at my finger going on the screen there. I really don't have very much hair, do I? Holy crow! It says in one of our readings in Al-Anon, we never get more than we can handle, but we may get more than we can control. All the time, baby. All the time. Step one requires us to humbly face our human limitations. And that's where I'm at today. I have absolutely no memory of a time before alcoholism. It has been there forever. I have absolutely no memory of a time of looking at the end of my arm and not seeing my hand. It has always been there. Whenever I look down, my feet have always been there. And alcoholism in my life is exactly the same. There's never a time when somebody sat down and said, hey, Rick, your grandmother and your father and all these relatives are alcoholics. It was just there. And by way of qualification, because that's what we do in Al-Anon, I know in AA they let anybody in. You have to know somebody. Get into Al-Anon. I have 5 major alcoholics in my life, 2 by birth, father and a grandmother. But more importantly to the recovery that I need to access, 3 by choice. I have just an unnatural inclination for finding alcoholic women. Of the 3 that I've had, I met 2 of them in Al-Anon. So if you are a female and are here today and in Al-Anon and wondering if you have a problem with drinking, ignore the questions that Alcoholics Anonymous presents to you, and afterwards simply come up and say to me, do you find me attractive? And if I say yes, run like hell to the other side. It's unfailing. I can search you out, baby. Anyhow, this alcoholism has been in my life the whole time. And you know, my last name is Jatuk. It's a Ukrainian name. My grandfather came to Canada from the Ukraine in the kind of the early teens of the 1900s. And my grandmother came from Scotland. We lost all contact with the Ukrainian side, but we had a lot of contact with the Scottish side. And so they like to drink, as you know that. And so every once in a while, you know, so for my grandmother, you know, she had 4 kids. You know, my dad's one of them. And every once in a while, we'd have these get-togethers from the Scottish side of the family. And there were a lot of them, and they liked to party, and they liked to have a lot of fun. And so it's kind of the clan would get together. I said that in Mississippi once. The room's starting to get... And Canadian, I don't know. Yeah. But anyhow, we'd have these clan gatherings. And you know, it is a natural and wonderful yearning for us to want to gather as family. It's a beautiful yearning. And we have that in my family. And so we'd want to get all of the uncles and the aunts and the cousins and everybody together. And the event would come. And everybody would arrive, and there would be great laughter and great fun. And everybody would be drinking. But it didn't seem to be a deal for a while. But there was this marvelous sound. And aren't there just great sounds? We hear great sounds here. Listen to this sound when we came in this room. It's the sound of joy. It's the sound of connection. It's the sound of fun. And that's the way it started. But then as active alcoholism came into the room, the sound changed. And what was happy and joyous and wonderful became mean. And people started to fight and throw and smash and hit and scream and curse. And then all of a sudden, this party that was supposed to be this fabulous get-together would disband. And the kids who had been banished away would kind of come upstairs, and they'd leave with their parents. And I'd kind of be hung and wondering, what happened? We were supposed to have a good time. Uncle George was coming. Uncle Bobby was coming. We were going to have fun. What happened to the fun? So like any good pre-Al-Anon family, we'd plan another one. And once again, they would come in, and once again, there would be that marvelous sound of fun and family getting together and real connection. And the drinking would start, and the sound would change, and the children would be banished, the fighting would ensue, the party would disband, and nobody would say anything. But everybody would wonder, why can't we get it right? What's wrong? I became a very nervous child. I was peeing all the time. And I threw up all the time. I did. I liked it. It was the only way I could get any relief from the pressure I felt in my stomach. I did odd little things, like I would clear out all the clothes in my closet, put them on my bed. I would get a light and hang it over the bar that holds the clothes. I'd bring a little table into the closet and a little chair, and I'd bring in some paper and some markers, and I'd make a sign that said, "Keep out!" And I'd put it on the outside of the door in the closet. And I'd go in the closet and close the door and wonder why nobody would come in. And I'd build a little fort in my basement so I could hide and be safe. And I'd hang up a sign that said, "Keep out!" And again, I would go inside and wonder why nobody would come in. And that is the story of my life. I had somebody call me not too long ago. They had heard one of these tapes. Found it in a discount bin. Somebody at home one day, I was at a conference. She said, hey, I was in Akron, waiting to get some tapes. And she said, I saw your tape. I go, Akron, really? It's where AA was founded. She said, yeah, I was standing in line to get the tapes, and they had the $1 bargain basement tapes, and there was yours. Dude, bring me right down. Wild. What was I saying? I was just talking about tapes. To help me out. I lost myself. What's that? The guy called me. Heard one of these tapes. And this is what he said. Listen to this carefully. He phoned me up and he said, I had a closet too. And I said, thanks for calling to let me know that. Because I understand what it's like to have a closet. And I understand what it's like as an adult man who doesn't have any active alcoholism anywhere in his life at times, to be suffering from a disease called alcoholism, the family disease. Because this nervous little kid, my mother was worried about him, and she brought him to the doctor. And they gave me all kinds of tests, and at the end they said, Mrs. Jatuk, there is nothing wrong with your son. Nobody asked, is there any drinking going on? If there was a test for what I had, it would have come back very positive. Because the disease that Mrs. Jatuk's son had when he was little, and the disease that he has to this very day, is called alcoholism, the family disease. And I don't drink. But it was going on in me. We say that in our literature all the time. And that's one of the big acceptances for me. If you accepted the fact that alcoholism is a family disease, and as such, it's a disease I have. Because if the alcoholic was the problem when the alcoholic left, my life would be just fine, thank you very much. For me, when the alcoholic leaves, I go looking for another one. Anybody else here done that? How many have had one? Put up your hand if you've chosen one. Come on, don't be shy. Look at that. How many have chosen two? Look at that. How many have chosen three? Look at that. Now, is that about the alcoholic? No way. That's about the Al-Anon. That's about there's something wrong with us, just like there was something wrong with Mrs. Jatuk's son all those years ago. Now, I had this father who drank. He'd like to do three things, my dad. He loved to drink beer, he liked to garden, and he loved to take off his clothes. And he'd do them in that order. And he liked to drink outside. Now, you think somebody that did that, would kind of have the same, at least if he was going to do his gardening, he would start in the front and work his way to the back. He'd start in the back and work his way to the front. And he'd start drinking in the morning. And as he worked in the back gardens and up and getting to the front, but mid-afternoon it was hot. He had a lot to drink. So he just take off your clothes. Nice and free. Alcoholics are free. Us Al-Anons are... Pickle stuck up our butt. And so I'm like that. Ooh. Not Dad. Let it all hang out. There he was. So you think now, he really didn't get naked. He kind of took Bermuda shorts and made them into a thong. And this is a sight. And he'd lather himself up in oil, and, he'd drink in the beer, and he smoked cigarettes, and there he is out front, and everybody's kind of looking. And he had an anger problem as well, my dad. We had this guy in the street who used to race a motorcycle or in a car up and down the street. And Dad would get really pissed. And one day he went running after him. In the thong and the beer and the cigarette and the oil and the belly. I always wondered what my mother thought looking out the window at him. Get in here, you hunk. I want you right now. This instant. It's an amazing thing, eh? Those of us who have been with alcoholics, like in the beginning, it's so great. And then the smell at night. Kind of crawling into bed. Ugh. I've had it happen too. That mixture of cigarette smoke, alcohol, and another man's aftershave. Ooh. Anyhow, Dad, I did that. Anyhow, Dad goes run up after this guy, catches him. The whole street kind of gathers around. pointing a cigarette, the beer, the whole thing. And we're inside. And there's Dad making an ass of himself. And there we are inside, embarrassed. And is that not a classic symptom of alcoholism, the family disease? The alcoholic takes all those actions. We stay inside and are embarrassed for what they are doing. Because you see, if your orientation to life is like mine, I am a nothing. And I have to find my identity in other people. And the people that I am finding my identity in are making asses of themselves. I am embarrassed. Because I do not know who I am. I seek my knowledge of who I am through you. And that is part of my disease of alcoholism, the family disease. Years later, I'm happy to tell you that Dad did get sober. Stayed sober for a long time. And he got the stickers on the back of the car. Easy does it. Let go and let God. What does my mother say to him? For God's sake, Donald, why do you have those stickers on the back of the car? Everyone's going to see them. I said, Mom, they've seen everything else. But there it is yet again, the exact same thing. When they get sick, we're embarrassed. They get well, we don't want anybody to know. Look, they didn't know. But there's our thinking. There it is. That's that Al-Anon mind. Then in 1968, an incredible thing happened to me. My mother joined Al-Anon in 1967. And in 1968, there was an Alateen conference in Toronto. And they needed places for Alateens to stay who are coming from out of town. So my mother said, into this active alcoholic home, she said, I'll take 4 Alateens. So in they came. And you people literally walked into my life in 1968. And this is what happened. They came in, we started chatting a little bit in the foyer, came into the front room, sat down and chatted. I didn't say anything. Of course, I didn't talk about anything. But I just felt that one thing. And I felt for the first time in my young life that it was okay to be with these people. And here I am in 2004 in Torrance, California. And I feel that it's okay just to be with you people. I am many hours on my plane away from home, and when I was out to dinner with Steve and Terry and Lise on Thursday night, I said to them, I feel like I could step out of here, get my car, and drive home. I feel like I am home. And is that not an amazing thing that we have here in these fellowships of Alcoholics Anonymous and the Al-Anon family groups? And I joined Alateen when I was 11, and I kind of hung in there. And they told me some fantastic things that I had to hear as a young boy. They said, Rick, your father is an alcoholic. He is not a bad man. They said, Rick, your father's not drinking at you. He has a disease. That when he starts, he cannot stop. And as an 11-year-old, 12-year-old boy, I needed to hear that. They said, Rick, he has a disease. He is not a disgrace. You can learn to love your father, whether he is drinking or not. And I was 11 and 12 when they told me that. And as I stand before you today, a man of 48 years old, I need to know the exact same thing. That I can love my father regardless of the state of his disease. And I am so glad that I know that today. And I stayed in Alateen for a good long time. As a matter of fact, I stayed there until they kicked me out. I was 21. They said, get out. I don't want to go. You got to get out. Nobody with beards and bald head is allowed in Alateen. So I went and found an Al-Anon group. The harem, really. It was cool. All these women, you know, they kind of, I remember you up here in Alateen. And every once in a while, a guy would come into the group. So I'd put up my hand, say, welcome, and my eyes would say, get lost. Go find your own harem. So I hung out with those women for a little while, but, you know, I really wasn't doing the deal. I was just kind of going to meetings. My sponsor says it better than anybody I've ever met. She said, Rick, going to an Al-Anon meeting or just hanging out in Al-Anon doesn't make you an Al-Anon any more than sitting in a garage makes you a car. As we can go to meeting after meeting after meeting for years and years and years. And when we're not doing the deal, we're getting sicker. And that's what happened to me. And then an amazing thing happened. I met her. Sweet. And that's when my disease really kicked in. So for those of you who are here today in Al-Anon, let me ask you this question. What's wrong? Why are you here? Why are you willing to do the service that you do? Why are you willing to sit through all these meetings? What are you looking for? Many of us, when we come in, say the very same thing. How do we get them to stop drinking so that I'll be okay? Listen to that one. We hear about the selfishness of the alcoholic. Look at the selfishness of the Al-Anon. How do I get him to stop drinking so that I will be okay? What about the person who's dying from that disease? Who cares? All that matters is me. All that matters is me. I want you to stop so that my life will be fine. Ugh. It doesn't sit right, but that is the truth. Take a look at what it says in our Al-Anon literature. I'm not going to read the whole book. I have a few tiny little quotes I'd like to read. On May 4th, it says this. In some way unfathomable to my human intelligence, my suffering could be the consequences of my own attitudes, actions, or neglects. On June 3rd, it says this. If we really do want peace of mind, the first thing to realize is that it does not depend on conditions outside of us, but those inside us. And on July 27th, it says, Al-Anon's prime purpose is to help us deal with the problem that alcoholism has aggravated. Again, my sponsor says it the best way of anybody I've ever heard. She said, adding an alcoholic to an Al-Anon like me is like sprinkling Miracle-Gro on my defects. 1935, AA started. They wrote a book in a few years, and on page 81, it says exactly what you have in the inside cover of your program. Bill knew this in the late 30s. Our design for living is not a one-way street. It is as good for the wife as for the husband. It is as good for the family of the alcoholics as it is for the alcoholic. And there's a reason for that. Because except for that allergy to alcohol, we really are not that different. I'm one of those disgusting social drinkers. I can drink a half a bottle of beer. I really can. And be quite satisfied. Pour out the rest or just kind of, save it for the next day. I save the bottle cap on a bottle of beer. This is where the alcoholics go. Most everything else you say, you look in these rooms and everybody's going, yeah. I start talking about this one, the alcoholics go, no. I told my friend Mildred a story about buying a 6-pack of beer one time, and I brought it home and it was warm, and so I didn't drink it. She said, what does temperature have to do with anything? So I put it in the fridge. The next day I was having a sandwich, and I thought, well, hey, I'll have a beer. So I took it out. It was cold. I drank half of it and said that was enough. Put it back in, and her jaw just kind of dropped. Then I explained to her that for the rest of the summer, I didn't feel like having a beer, so eventually the one that was half I threw out, and the other 5 I just kept in the fridge. And somewhere near in the fall, they were still in there, and I thought, well, they're taking up room in my fridge, so I took them out and put them in the closet. Then I had bought supplies for around Christmas time, and hey, there are those 5 bottles of beer. And I said, they must be bad by now. And at this point, Mildred is ashen. And so I took those 5 bottles of beer, and I emptied them down the sink. And she looked at me with this fear. And she says, now, Rick, that is alcohol abuse. I am absolutely an alcohol abuser. Booze does not do it for me. As soon as I start to feel fuzzy, I stop because I get out of control. So the substance doesn't do it. But all this other stuff, you bet. There's this thing that has to happen in Al-Anon, I believe. Al-Anon, we say there are no musts. I'll be so bold as to say this. I believe there is one. I believe there is one absolute in Al-Anon. And that is, if we are to get better as Al-Anons, we must cross the bridge from the side that says, you are the problem, to the side that says, oh my God, it's in me. Sponsor said it this way. She gave me a little sticker to put on my mirror. In answer to the question, what is the problem? The answer is, you are looking at the problem. Little sticker on my mirror. It's still there. And it's taken a long time to accept that fact. But when I was at the end of the third alcoholic, it was like, man, oh man, this is not them. This absolutely cannot be. And that was a real awakening for me, that there is no way on earth that what's wrong with me is about them. And I started to take a look at that and just what it is that we do as Al-Anon. I don't know what you do as Al-Anons, but I'll tell you what I do. Because if I have a disease called alcoholism, the family disease, it has to have some symptoms. And these are some of mine. And the absolute first one is this one. I need someone to need me. And if I can find people who need me for a brief moment in time, the screaming in my gut silences. It's an illusion, but for a brief moment in time, it works. Because how can I be a nothing if I have somebody who needs me? If I have somebody to fix a full-time project. To hell with alcohol. It comes and goes. An alcoholic, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're there all the time. All the time. And it's always a project. And an Al-Anon like me loves to have a project. So this is how this happened for me. I met one. I was in music school, in university. And I had applied to go to school. Where's Kathy? Kathy, where are you? In Banff. Applied to go to a music school in Banff, and I was accepted to go to the school. I was playing in a small classical ensemble, and the person who invited me or accepted me said, why don't you contact the other 4 members of the group, have a few rehearsals before you go to the school, you'll be a little farther ahead before the program starts. Great idea. I contacted 3 of them, we made arrangements for a rehearsal, and then I phoned her. I had never met her. I have never seen her, but I'm here to tell you that an Al-Anon like me, his antenna go up even through a telephone line. And what was supposed to be a short little conversation to arrange a practice turned into this hour-long lust fest on the phone. And she had done so many things, and she had so much great energy, and she had seen people that I wanted to see, and played with people I wanted to play with, and been places I wanted to go, and it's like I kind of hung up and was going, this was exciting. But I'm also a researcher. And so I started asking around about her, and I found out that, boy, she was a fantastic trumpet player, really quite good looking, and she was experienced. And that was exciting to me because I wasn't, at least not with other people. Had to do something in that closet. Like you don't know what I'm talking about. Anyhow, the magic day came and we were going out to Banff to go to school. And we had spent lots of time talking on the telephone, and she would tell me things. Like, her brother used to abuse her. And I didn't know I was doing this. But inside I would go, I can help you with that, sweetheart. And she told me things that had gone on with her father, and I go, I can help you with that, darling. And then one day I'm at work. I had a summer job working in the liquor store. Can you believe that? And I was at the liquor store and working at my summer job, and she phones me, and she was drunk. And she said, my boyfriend was supposed to come over. I drank this bottle of wine. Actually, he didn't come over. I drank this bottle of wine. Why don't you come on over? Now, this little part of me goes, bad. This other part of me goes, oh, all right. It was exciting. And so this magic, and I didn't go over because that little part, just for a brief moment in time, I actually had some saneness. No, I don't think I should come over. But inside I was going, And so the magic day came, and I was at the airport. This protected little child. I was 21. I was a protected little child. My mother's on one side, my dad's on the other, and in she came. And guys, she was bouncing. This beautiful little blue top and this black glistening hair and this smile and this energy. And we watched her come in the airport, and it was bing, 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 and she kind of stood right in front of us and had her suitcase in one hand and her suitcase of trumpets in the other and said, hi! And this is just like electricity. And she bent right over to put them down. My mother went into mild cardiac arrest right on the spot. Eyes popped right out of my father's head, and I'd been in Alateen long enough to know that I was about to have a spiritual experience. And I'll tell you, we kind of got in that airplane, and we ordered beer. I had a beer. And when an Al-Anon orders a beer, we mean one. That's what we mean. She ordered 1, and then 2, then 3, then 4, and 5. And if there's anything I say to you today that you can take to the bank, it's that she had 5. Because every Al-Anon I've ever met in any part of your country or mine knows how to do one simple thing. Count. You bet. Everybody answers that the same way. We all know how to count. I still do it. I asked my sponsor one day, I said, does that ever stop? She said, no. So anyhow, we get out there, and, I found out that it's a lot more fun with another person than it is by yourself in a closet. It was great. And then we'd play music, and that was fantastic too. But then there was something else. And if you're an Al-Anon like me, if you have alcoholism, a family disease like I've got it, there is something that's even better. Because we'd play music, and then we'd do it, and then we'd have therapy. She would tell me what was wrong with her, and I would tell her how to fix it. I was somebody. I had arrived. It's like Bill says in his story, I had arrived. I had her on my arm, fixing her. I didn't know I was doing that. In retrospect, I see now. 2 weeks into this, what do you call it? A parasitic entanglement. That's what Milton calls it. I used to call it a relationship. She calls it a parasitic entanglement. I heard another guy say not too long ago, he says like two ticks without a dog. And they're chewing away at each other. So we get into this thing, whatever you want to call it, and she says these words to me, and listen to this, and if you're an Al-Anon, this is music. She said, Rick, I've been seeing a therapist for an awful long time. But she said, I don't need to see that therapist anymore, because now I have you. Oh, fragrance. Oh. Because if your orientation to life is that you are a nothing, and somebody says, I don't need him because I have you, pull that in, baby. You take that in. Politely we talk about some of our problems in Al-Anon, say, we have low sense of self-esteem. I didn't have low sense of self-esteem. I had no sense of self-esteem. There were silly things that I couldn't do. I couldn't go buy a pair of pants. Because if you buy a pair of pants, there's 3 mirrors. You got to look at yourself. Couldn't stand to look at myself. Come to South Bay, you got 4 damn screens. I can look at myself. I'm getting better. I'm improving. But you have all these things going on, But there we are. Somebody says that to me, and boy, I just thought it was great. I got home after 7 weeks of doing this, and people are saying, Rick, what are you doing with this woman? And I didn't say, she's wonderful, she's talented, we're getting along, we have a lot in common. I said this. Deep down inside, there's a beautiful person. And I'm going to help bring her out. How healthy. How noble of me to do that. She didn't ask. I just assumed that that's what she wanted. But over time, I was like a dog that catches a car. What do you do with it when you get it? And this is what you do. You start to collect. So I'd keep her there. Oh, I forgot to tell you, we got married. This is how we got engaged. We're lying in her bed one night, 5 years into this thing. And she says, are we going to get married or what? And I was afraid. So I said, I guess so. Next day, she had the church hall booked, the wedding dress was bought. And she's saying, where's my ring? I'm going, So what I did for the next year of engagement was I just convinced myself that this was the totally right thing to do. And it was the end of my life. Getting involved in that. But I had this person that I was collecting, and she stayed at home, and I finished my time in teacher's college, and I found myself applying for a job sitting in front of a principal of an inner city school in downtown Toronto. We had this marvelous little interview, and he said these words to me. He said, Rick, we have a lot of very needy students in this school. Brother, I am the man for you. It was this Catholic high school. And I moved into that school. Because he said, people don't think that these kids do an awful lot. Oh, really? Because an Al-Anon like me loves a challenge. When you tell me something can't be done, I say, oh yeah? And do I say, oh yeah, because I'm going to say, look what these kids will be able to do? I say, look at what I will be able to do. Because one of my drugs of choice is recognition. Because you can't be a nothing if people recognize you for doing great things. 3 years into this job at this high school, we put on a musical, Fiddler on the Roof. Whole thing. Conducted the orchestra, the kids all sang, the sets, like the whole deal. It's a great show. At the end of the last performance, the principal brought me up on stage from the pit, and in front of everybody hugged me And he had a microphone, and he held me back, and he said in front of the entire audience, he said, "Rick, I've made a lot of decisions since I've been the principal of this school, but the best decision I ever made was to hire you." Pull that in. See, I'm not a people pleaser. I am an approval sucker. And that was a good one. Now, was I doing that for those kids? No, I wasn't. I was doing it for Ricky Doodah. I was doing it for me. And I'd get that recognition. And the thing about recognition is it comes and it goes. But if you're not accepting a higher power, if I'm making everything else my higher power, I have to continue to self-seek and get it. So that for a brief moment in time, I can have something happen that will stop the screaming in my belly. And that's what it was for a brief moment in time. And then it came back. And when I was not accepting any kind of higher power, the only answer was, it's gone, I better do more. And the cycle continued and continued and continued. And nobody is drinking in my life at that time. And the cycle continued. Because the tragedy of alcoholism, the family disease, is not the drama and the trauma that happens during the active alcoholic episodes. It's the living out of a life with a screaming inside your belly that says you're nothing. Nobody in my family ever told me that. But somewhere along the way, that was the message I got. And I had to find a way to stop the screaming. But that wasn't the only way I did it. There were others. The other one was anger. Anybody here know any angry elements? Love anger. Anger is fantastic. It gives me a sense of power. And when you are feeling and know you're absolutely powerless, if you can be angry, you have an illusion of power. And my anger would come out in all kinds of crazy ways. It would come out at people. Happened in school one time. I was walking down the hall. A mentally challenged kid, reached up and grabbed my tie. Before I even knew it, I had grabbed him by his tie, lifted him up, and thrown him into a locker. That is not good for a teaching career. I put him down. It caught my attention. I did other things like that at school. I would have episodes where I took kids on a trip one time. They did something. I went into an absolutely maniacal screaming fit. The other supervisor locked herself in her room. It scared the crap out of me, but it started to come out. That anger started to come out. I was at home one time. I was making a fried egg. As a bachelor, I was making a fried egg for dinner. And I cracked the egg in the frying pan and I broke the yolk. And out of nowhere, this rage came out. And I reached in and grabbed that goop and flung it against the wall. And I took that frying pan and started smashing it on the top of the stove. And I looked around and there wasn't a soul in the room. And where'd that come from? So at my Al-Anon, I went back to Al-Anon actually after that marriage ended after 3 years. She left. Can you believe it? Oh, God. Who wouldn't want to be with me? And I came crawling back to Al-Anon, April of 1987. And I found myself in the meetings talking with people, listening to them, kind of looking, kind of loving in their eyes as they're talking. And inside my head, I'm thinking, I'd like to smash you right in the mouth. They'd be talking about some spiritual principle, and I'd be going, wonder what you'd look like if I put your nose where your ear is. And these thoughts started to scare me. Started to get my attention. So, keep an open mind. Well, actually, then I was at my meeting one night, and I was sharing about my spiritual awakening. In these soft, wonderful tones about how God is just my best friend. And how He saved my life. And two people beside me started playing with each other's shoelaces. I was the GR at the time in the group. And a monster came out and screamed at the top of his lungs at these people, "I'm sharing!" They went back to speaking in soft, dulcet tones about my spiritual awakening. At the end of the meeting, the whole group went, "Ah!" Because a collective gasp in the room. We definitely don't want what he has. And that really got my attention. And I had someone who loved me enough to say, now let me tell you, I'm doing all this and I do not have a sponsor. Remember, I had a closet. And it's possible to come here for a long time and hang out and get sick, but never invite anybody in. And that's what was happening with me. And finally, after that episode in my group, someone said, Rick, you need some help. And I actually went and I sought some. Keep an open mind, but I needed to get outside help. And I ran into somebody who could give it to me, and after doing a whole lot of things, she said this to me. She said, Rick, you have alcoholic rage. You're an alcoholic that doesn't drink. And if you don't do something about that someday, you're really going to hurt somebody. And you're going to get put away for that. And she was right. Because on a camping trip one time with my wife, I had tried to chop at her with an axe. It just kind of came out of me. I'd beat her up at night when I sleep. I'm a control freak. I'd control mostly with me, but it would release itself at night. It would release itself in other times, and I'd get these thoughts would just pop into my head, like those punching people in the face. Or when I had this hatchet and I was cutting wood for the fire, this thought just popped in, chop at her. And it raised, and I almost did it. Like I was that far, and I dropped it, and I ran away, and I was shaking at what is the insanity that is happening inside my life. And what I discovered through all of this was one simple thing, that I'm really not an angry person, and I'm really not a rageful person. What I am is a terrified person. And my terror manifests itself as anger and rage. That's what I discovered. So I'm happy to tell you today that I've not tried to rearrange anybody's face for a long time. So please do come up and say hello. I promise I won't smack you. And I'd just like to end by saying this, that anger and rage have two sides. Homicide and suicide. Same coin, flipped on. But that's not the only thing I do. I'd be a victim. I loved being a victim. Victim is an action, by the way. Being a victim is the sweetest thing there is, because I can abdicate responsibility for everything. Everything I can just go, it's all his fault, it's all his fault, it's all their fault. I loved it, because I didn't have to accept any responsibility. But is there anything more pathetic than a whining victim at 35 years old, still blaming all the things that are wrong with his life on the fact that his father drank too much beer? It's really pretty sad. My sponsor says it this way. She says, Rick, sooner or later you have to accept the fact that it's too late to have a happy childhood. But it's never too late to have a happy life. And don't we know that to be true? I was a whining victim. Know the definition of whining? Anger escaping through a very small hole. And that was me. That was me. I was a murderer and a control freak and on and on and on and on. And there are some of my symptoms of alcoholism, the family disease. And that, my dear friends, is why the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous work for me. But they were unable to work when I was trying to do them by myself. I was doing them alone, and I had an idiot for a sponsor. The seminal moment in the history of Alcoholics Anonymous is not when Bill saw that white light. It is when Bill met Bob in a gatehouse in Akron, Ohio on Mother's Day in 1935. When one met another, that is the beginning of AA, and it is the spiritual beginning of Al-Anon. And I absolutely had to get a sponsor. So I had one for a while, and he left, and I didn't have one, and I was without one, and my dearest friend Mildred, in the world. We started to pray about that I needed a sponsor. And a person came to Toronto to speak, and Mildred was God's little envoy on earth for me, and introduced me to this person. And we had a great, great connection. And talked with her a lot, and it was fabulous. And I'd set out these parameters for a sponsor. Had to be a man, had to be active in service, had to live close by, all these things. It was me. But I met this person, and boy, I absolutely loved what she had. And after she talked at our conference on Saturday night, she came to get me. And she said, hey, let's go out and get some ice cream. So we're walking along the street in downtown Toronto, and she says, hey, tell me about you. So for the first time in my life, I uttered that thing about the axe. I said, well, hey, I tried to chop my wife's head off with an axe. And she laughed. We bonded, the two potential murderers that we are. She just finished telling us a story about trying to drown her husband in a bathtub. And we identified. And I wanted what she had more than anybody I'd ever met in my life. And so Mildred and I, 10 years ago this week, found ourselves heading on our way to a retreat in Missouri. And she says to me as we're driving to Missouri, Rick, have you found a sponsor yet? And I go, no, I haven't. She says, I think you have. May God bless you with friends like I have and my dearest friend, Mildred. May God bless you with a friend like that. And I said, I think you're right, but it's too crazy. She lives so far away. She's not a man. She said, well, let's pray about that. And we did. And at the end of that time, we were away in a retreat. At the end of it, I sat down and I wrote the single most honest letter I'd ever written in my life. And I simply said this: I am sick to death of doing this by myself. I have reached a point where I absolutely want what you have. And I will do absolutely anything you ask me to do if you will be my sponsor. That's how I asked her. Put it in a letter and mailed it. But 10 days later, I got a package. I thought, well, she talks a lot. Maybe she writes a lot, too. It's either a you're in, baby, or it's a long-winded forget it, pal. And so she said this beautiful thing to me, and in the end, she said, Rick, she said, welcome to the family. It's the last nice thing she said for a year. I had signed up. And that was 10 years ago this month. 10 years. The sponsor lives 1,800 kilometers away from me, and I've spoken to her every Monday night for 10 years. And you know what? For 10 years in a row, she has been there every single Monday night. If I phone at 10:01, she says, you're late. One time, I must say, I did forget. I didn't forget, I fell asleep. I had taken my kids to play at a morning breakfast show before Christmas. And I got home and I was just too tired. I fell asleep. She phoned me about 5 after 10. She said, are you okay? I wasn't mad because she said, you're so regular. And for the first time in my life, I've been regular and dependable about something. And she told me how to work a program. She didn't say, I suggest you do this. She said, this is what I want you to do. And it was like elixir to me. Because I had sat in these rooms for so long, and I desperately wanted what you had, and it took me a long time to reach a point where I was willing to surrender and be totally teachable and say, I'll do it. She introduced me. I spoke at her group one time, and she introduced me as this guy who sent her a letter asking for sponsorship, and he said he'd do absolutely anything I would ask him to do, and she went, And you know what? I have. And I'm getting better. I am getting better. And she tells me that, and it's so wonderful. She started to actually say a few nice things to me. But here are some of the things she said along the way. Just last month, this marvelous relationship I'm going to talk to you about. She said, you know, Rick, she said, the only thing wrong with your relationship with Lise is you. Ugh. But sponsors can say stuff like that because it's right. So I was getting into my head. I have a magic magnifying mind. Anybody have one of those? One little thing goes wrong, you go, there it is, you're out there. I'm just like that. Another thing she said to me one time, a guy in our area service assembly tapped me on the shoulder and he said, Rick, I think you'd make a good delegate. Really? Fabulous. Recognition. So I called my sponsor. I said, hey, this guy says he thinks I'd make a great delegate. She goes, oh, really? She says, Rick, don't you think your area deserves a delegate who's practiced all 12 steps? I did not stand for a delegate. Told me one time, she said, Rick, your mind is a dangerous place. Don't you dare go in alone. And all those things are true, and I love her to death. And another interesting thing has happened with this long-distance kind of sponsorship. Because sponsorship is not about gender, and it is not about geography. It is about commitment. It is about commitment to spiritual growth. And she told me a way to practice these steps, read all the stuff in our books, answer these questions, talk to her. And then after I've done each step, she said these magnificent things to me. She said, Rick, congratulations. You've done step 1, for example, to the very best of your ability. And listen to this music. Move on. Take that in. Move on. And I did 2, I did 3, I did 4. I flew down to see her. I did my 5. 2 days. Read that thing to her, and she sat and listened to every bit of it. When we were finished, we went outside and burnt it. Don't know if that's not in our literature. That's what I did. I'm sharing you my experience. It was an incredible thing. When we came back in, I said these words to her. I said, I have told you absolutely everything. And my deepest fear was that if I told you stuff, you would loathe me. You would absolutely banish me from your life. And you know what my sponsor said to me? She said, Rick, I love you more because I know you better. Listen to that. The fear that I had that if you knew me, you would loathe me was completely wrong. You gave me a set of 12 concrete principles to act on, and I did that with another human being. And I found that I had always wanted to get there, but I was walking that way. And what she did was she grabbed me and said, do these things. And slowly but surely, I did those things, and I moved in this direction, and I found the connection. The keep out sign that I had had over my whole being all my life started to fall away. And I did the rest of those steps. I've made those amends, and there's been some phenomenal gifts. How long have I been talking here? Yeah, I'm doing good. Only 55 minutes. Got another hour. I don't. But I would like to share with you some of the absolutely incredible gifts that have come from working those steps with another human being and being actively involved in a fellowship. Actively involved. I have a relationship with my mother that has been strained from the get-go. They told me that my father was an alcoholic. He was not a bad man. They never said anything about my mother. And it is a truism that it is often the non-alcoholic parent in a family who has as much, if not more, effect on the child than the alcoholic. And that hurts to hear that. It hurt my mother in the beginning. But it is the truth. And I would like to say this to you, that I know that nobody in an alcoholic environment is doing anything on purpose. There was never a day in my father's life, I believe, that he woke up and said, I'm going to go out tonight, get drunk, and come home and terrorize my family. He never once said that. He'd wake up and want to go out for a few drinks, and then the disease would take its course. And it was the same with my mother. She didn't want to do the things that went on. But when you're alone, when you're in this alcoholic situation, you don't know what to do, and so you talk to the person that's there with you. So I became my mother's 5-year-old therapist, 7-year-old counselor, 9-year-old sexual confidant. And that's what happens in active alcoholism. I had a more of like a husband-wife relationship with my mother than I did as a son, mother. And it was challenging. And I thought my mother hated me. And she loves me to death. But I didn't know that. I couldn't see it. Until you people helped remove the octopus from my face about that, I was unable to see. And I started to see some incredible things about this mother who loved her son more than anything on this planet. Here's one simple thing. I told you that I'm a music teacher. Yearly, I take my students out to play in it's a music festival. And the way that these things work is that there's one group on stage, there's one group in another room preparing to go on stage, and there's a group in another room who has just been on stage getting work, like getting a clinic, they call it. And so we were on this particular night, and we were the second last group. Now, normally what happens is when you're on, all the other people are waiting to go through the process or in the audience listening to your band. But when my band was on stage, the only other group left was the one in the room preparing. And so this huge hall was empty except for the adjudicators, and there was a couple of people there. Band played really well. We finished, we left the stage, and we were walking off to the room where they're going to give us a clinic. And you know who was sitting in that auditorium? It was my mother. And she looked at him and she said, good job, son. She has never missed anything I've ever done. To this very day. Every single concert I have ever been in or conducted, my mother is there. She loves to do this little thing. She'll sit down and sit beside a parent and say, oh, does your son or daughter play? And they say, oh, yeah, my daughter plays the flute. And the parent will say to my mother, do you have a son or daughter in the band? My mom will say, oh, yes. And the parent will say, and what does he play? And she'll say, he's the conductor. She loves it. And it is so beautiful that she's there. Now, my mom had a real problem back in November, problem with her bowels. And, when we make amends, and I made clear and direct amends to my mother, but they're ongoing as well. And she needed some real help. And she had to go in for an operation. And I started taking her around to the doctors. And, she was embarrassed that I'd see what was going on. And I said, Mom, if there's anybody in this world who can see what's going on with you, it's your son. And I didn't care. I just took her around. And she had to go in for an operation on her intestine. And the day before, she had to take this stuff that would kind of clear you out. It ain't pretty. But you had to do it, and it's necessary when you're having an operation like that. So, I took the day off work, and I was there with her while she was taking this. You drink one glass every 10 minutes. I was timing it. Here, another one. I don't want it. Drink it. Tastes bad. I don't care. Drink it. And so she started to get this stuff down, and after the third glass, we're sitting around the kitchen, and she goes, oops. And in she goes to the bathroom. And every 10 minutes I come in. She said, I don't want you to see me this way. Mom, if there's anybody in the world that can see you like this, it's me. And at that moment, I realized that this is love. That this is love. It doesn't matter what she looks like. It doesn't matter what's going on. All that matters is that I am there and being present for my mother. And the next day, we brought her to the hospital. And my sister and I, and they took her out, and I said, Mom, when you open your eyes, the first person you will see will be me. Because I had abandoned my mother. Thinking that she didn't love me, I left. I berated her. I called her down. I made fun of her. I called her names. And I was making my amend. And when she opened her eyes, her son was the first person that she saw, and her daughter was standing right beside her son. And each day I went to see my mom with gratitude in my heart that I could just sit there with her. And on the second last night she was in the hospital, she said, son, I'd love to go down to the chapel. So I went and found a wheelchair. They only had a big one. It was this huge, big wheelchair. She's a tiny little woman. And I rolled her down, and I thought, I'm bringing my mom down to the chapel. And we sat in there, and there was nobody else there. And we just contemplated for a while. And I said, Mom, can we say a prayer? I had never done that with my mother. And so I started praying openly and freely, like I've done with my sponsor and I've done with so many people here. And it was an absolutely beautiful moment. And then she's prayed too. And then you know what we did? We started talking about how valuable these fellowships have been to our life. And the relationship I have with my mother today is God-given. And I love her deeply. And it is you that gave me the direction on what to do to be the very best son that I can be to a mother who has loved me all my life. And I couldn't see it because of my disease. Beautiful. You might figure out that I've had a few problems with relationships in my life. And after the third alcoholic, my sponsor said to me, Rick, I think you need to take a break. And I found myself saying, I think you're right. And she said, I'd like you to swear off women, be celibate is what that means, for 4 months. What? But I did it. I said, I think you're right. And then she said some incredible stuff to me. She said, Rick, you need to discover a few things. One, she said, you need to discover that women are people. That you can have a friendship with a woman that doesn't involve sex. And you need to discover that they are not just sexual objects. And you also need to discover that you can live on your own and that you are okay in and of yourself. So I did that for 4 months. Very, very active in Al-Anon. And I went down to see her. I see her every New Year's. And that was the end of the 4 months. And I said to her on New Year's Eve, I said, hey, my 4 months are up tonight. I'm thinking a Playboy Bunny's going to come in at midnight. Hey! And she says to me, when I say to her, hey, my 4 months are up, she says, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. And I said, I knew you were going to do it. I knew it. And she says, what do you think about extending it for a year? And out of my mouth came, I think you're right. Can I step back if you... And you know what? But she was right. And I began to I made a conscious decision that I was not going to be a predator. That I was simply going to find out that it's okay to be alone and that I can have friendships with women. But in my thinking, I thought that at the end of the year, that Playboy Bunny's coming through my front door. And a year came and a year went. And my sponsor said, well, just give God a chance. So I said, I'm willing to do that. And I was starting to discover that women are amazing people when you're not hunting them for the reason I hunted them. That I started to have friendships with women. I dated a few women, and I found that after a few dates, you know what? It really wasn't any kind of romantic connection there, but I wasn't so far in that I could just it was okay. Because my deal was, hi, we're married. What are we going to call the grandkids? Skip the children. Let's just talk about the grandkids. I mean, it was like, doom, like that. The only thing I do fast in my life at all is that. Everything else, I'm a real slow guy. But 2 years came and went, and 3 years came and went. And I'm getting a little impatient. My sponsor says, just keep trusting. God hasn't brought you this far to let you down. 4 years came and went. And I'm saying, I'm a man. I have needs. She said, you just trust in what God is doing. And I found out that I started to iron my own shirts. I could wash my own dishes. I could look after my own house. I started to become an adult. And then one day, I'm out at an Al-Anon day in Toronto. I sat down at the back, and the person had been sitting beside me, and that person left. And someone came over and sat down beside me. And I kind of looked over and said, the drought might be over. And I reached out my hand and I said, hi, my name is Rick. And she said, yes, I know who you are. Recognition. And that was the beginning of what has been an absolutely magnificent 4 relationship. And on July the 3rd, 2004, in Torrance, California, she is still sitting beside me. And it's beautiful. And it's a healthy relationship. My clothes are still in my closet, and her clothes are still in hers. She talks to my sponsor. Not about me. She just talks to my sponsor. It's like it freaks me out that can happen. But there's a healthy thing going on here. One time, my sponsor asked me at a yearly event I go to down there in where she lives. She asked me to do a little workshop one time. She said, maybe you can come down and do a workshop on relationships. And so when I got the letter inviting me to do the workshop, it said, we'd like you to do it on sponsorship. And so when I called her on my Monday night call, I said, I got the letter about doing the workshop on sponsorship, but I thought you'd wanted me to do it on relationships. And she says, no, Rick. Down here, we like our workshop leaders to do workshops on topics they know something about. 2 years into my relationship with Lise, my sponsor sent a letter saying, would you and Lise like to do a workshop on healthy relationships? And we did. And we've done these tradition things. We do that. It really is. It's beautiful. And there's been some immense gifts and things with her children. One of the wisdom that my sponsor gave me was allow her children to come to me. And that has happened, and especially with her youngest child. When I started going out, I'd say, hi, Phil, and he'd go, ugh. That was his response to me. Or I'd come in and he'd leave. My birthday was last May, just about a month and a half ago, and for the very first time, he gave me a card, and he gave me a record, because he knows I love blues and jazz music, and it was on vinyl. He said, I found this. He said, it's my favorite record. He said, I know you like vinyl. He said, I got one of these for you. He came to me, and I just was me, and I was the me that you people have shown me I can be. I can be a gentle, loving, patient, kind, caring person with God at the center. And when I am right with God, the screaming stops. And it lasts. It's not fleeting. It lasts. And if on a daily basis I am solid with God, I am quiet inside, and I can be the person I want to be. I can look in the mirror and say, not bad. I can look at myself out on the screen and laugh at the fact that I just have so little hair. I can laugh at stuff like that. It used to drive me crazy, but I can do that. And lastly, I'd like to talk about my dad, and then I will sit down. My sponsor said to me, tell this story every time you talk. So I do. Had a good, hard time with my dad. But when he was into his recovery good, and I made this decision, because my response to my father was always as a young child to a father. I was always looking for his approval, and I needed to become a man with my dad. And my sponsor said, well, why don't you start doing some things with him? So my dad loved to do things outdoors, and so we started to canoe together. Take a one-day canoe trip, chat out in the woods around a campfire. Fantastic. Do another one. This is nice. I'm starting to build a relationship. We're bonding. But really, we are bonding. No fun. We are bonding with my dad. Having a relationship with him. Did a 2-day trip. Man, this is working out really well. But like the real people we are that don't really know limits, we said, well, two-day one works. Let's go on for 16 days. So that's what we did. So we booked a canoe trip, that was so far north, the sun didn't set. It took 4 airplanes to get there. The 4th airplane landed on a gravel bar beside the river. Kind of dropped us off and said, actually, it's 14 days. 1 day to get there, 1 day to get back. So 14 days on the river, 14 days that way, and took off. And there I am, with my dad. We had a guide and another guy in a canoe, but I was in the canoe with my dad. And we had to do all this kind of stuff. Now, this was a raging whitewater river in the Northwest Territories. And so off we went on this 14-day downriver tour. The water was so high in the river that you had to put a skirt on the canoe so that you wouldn't get capsized immediately. So it's kind of turned it into a huge two-man kayak. And so my dad was in the back and I was in the front. He was in the control position. I'm in the weenie position in the front. Now remember, the idea is to bond. And I've spent, a couple of days max with my dad for decades. And here we are all this time out there. And things started to come out. Now, one of the things that you have to do when you're on a river like that is you have to learn how to get out of the boat. And you don't just stop a canoe and step out. You have to do this thing called an eddy turn. And you do a few maneuvers, and it flips the canoe around like 180 degrees, and you kind of find an eddy, which is where the water goes backward in the river, and you basically just float into the shore. So the guide taught us how to do this. The guy in the control position, Dad, told the guy in the front position, me, what to do. So for the first few times, that's great. Do this, cross over here, flow into the shore. That is really cool. Now, by day 3, I know how to make an eddy turn. Dad is still telling me how to make an eddy turn. Does son turn around and say, Dad, I know how to make an eddy turn? No. Son stuffs. Day 4, Dad's telling me to do an eddy turn. Day 5, day 6, day 7, Dad is telling Rick how to do an eddy turn, and he is getting angry. And so finally it comes, and he tells me how to do it, and it just blows up out of me. And I say, I know how to make a goddamn eddy turn. And I turn around and I look at him, and he felt that was an appropriate time to say, I love you. I went, what? And that was it. And as my sponsor said, the octopus got me. And I couldn't get it off my face. And so the rest of that trip, I was pissed. I'm in the tent with this guy. I'm in the canoe with this guy. I'm eating dinner with this guy. And I want to chop him. And I get home and I call my sponsor. And she says, how was the trip? You want to hear about the trip? I go. And it's good sponsors like a buzzard. They kind of ask you a question and they hover. She lets me put out enough. And finally I had to stop for a breath of air. And she dives in and she says, what was good about the trip? She says to me, you mean to say you have just spent 14 days in the most beautiful country you can imagine and there was nothing good? Yes. She gave me an assignment. She said, you will write down a list of all the good things. And so I did. The following Monday night, I wrote down a list, and I had 7 of them. And I read them to her when I phoned. I had done my assignment. Here it is. I wrote down, here are the 7 good things. Then she said to me, now you will write them in a letter to your father. My response was, do I have to mail it? She said, yes, you do. Now, don't misinterpret this letter. This was not one of those I hate you letters. This, my dear friends, was a love letter to my father. And she said, Rick, you will write your dad a letter thanking him for the experience that you and he had and thanking him for and outlining those 7 good things. And I said that's a good idea. And I wrote the letter. And the following Monday night, I walked up to the mailbox, and as I was dropping it into the mailbox, I said to myself, here is the action of recovery. I'm not going to have to wait till my dad is dead and stuff this into the side of the coffin. I'm not going to have to go to the gravesite and dig a hole and bury it. If he stays alive from the time I mail it till for 3 or 4 days, he's going to get this. And about 4 days later, I get a call. It was the summertime, so I was at home. And my dad had been crying. And he said, son, I got your letter. And what I had said in the letter was this. I said, Dad, I want to thank you for an incredible time on the Nahanni River. I said, thank you for helping me with the expense of the trip because it was pricey, and he helped me out with a portion of that. I said, Dad, I want to tell you how proud I was of you, that you knew more about the geography, about the plant life, and about the wildlife than the guide. He was teaching the guide. And I was proud of my father. My father at the time was about 63, 64 years old, and he had more stamina than I did. And I said, Dad, I'm proud of you. I'm really proud of you. But then another thing happened it happened on the trip that I hadn't realized until my sponsor asked me to get the octopus off my face. You see, I'm afraid of heights. And one of the activities on the canoe trip is you stop the canoe and you take a hike up a mountain. So we had lunch and just started walking up the mountain, and I just forgot I was afraid of heights. We stopped halfway up. Everybody, the other 3 guys are standing around, looking around, saying, man, this is great. I'm going too far, too high. I can't do any more. And after the rest, and I'm frightened. I am. And after the rest, the other guys start to go up, and my dad too, and a magic moment happened. They said, Rick, are you coming up? And I said, no, I think this is a little too high for me. I'm going to go down. And my dad looked at them, and he looked at me, and he said, I'm going to go down with Rick. And my dad took a few steps down, and he said, Rick, come on down this way. And a few more, and he said, Rick, come on down this way. And my father led me down the mountain. And I wrote that in the letter. I said, Dad, I'm afraid of heights. Thank you for being a loving man and leading me down the mountain. And he didn't make fun of me. He didn't criticize it. He didn't even mention it. And he read it, and he started to cry, and he phoned me, and he said, son, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever received in my life. He said, I love you deeply. And I said, Dad, I love you deeply too. And you know what he does with that letter today? So I wrote it to him, but it's his letter. He keeps it in the album with the photographs. And everybody he shows the photographs to, he says, look at how much my son loves me. And it's true. And then he started to drink. And how do I deal with that? And that is my challenge. And if you believe in the power of prayer, I ask you simply to say a prayer for my dad, that if it be God's will, may he find his way back. And say a prayer for me, that I can find a way around this active disease so that I can be the best loving son to this man who loves me deeply and dearly, and who I love deeply and dearly. In London, England, there is a cathedral, St. Paul's Cathedral, and there is a side chapel in that cathedral. And there is a picture that I used to believe hung on the wall, but it doesn't. It sits in a great big frame on an altar. And it's a picture of a traditional robed figure standing with its right hand raised and knocking on the door of a thatched cottage. A few years ago, I went to England and sat in front of this painting because it means so much to me. And one of the reasons it means so much to me is because of something I witnessed at the South Bay Roundup in 1998. And when you end your meetings, you stand with a moment of silence. You meditate, you knock, and you pray. And this picture has this traditional robed figure standing with its right hand knocking on the door, and it's holding a lantern in the left hand, and in the top corners it says, the light of the world. And underneath the painting it says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, I will come into him and have supper with him, and he with me. And as every one of us in this room knows, the doorknob is on the inside of the door. And it is my job to open it. And by taking the simple, concrete, precise actions of the 12 steps, I have opened that door to my God. And at the South Bay Roundup, at the end of a meeting, what do? And you pray, and the door is opened, and God is invited in. Because that higher power is the only thing I have ever found that will stop the screaming and fill that hole and allow me to be someone who feels like he can belong among decent people. It allows me to be a loving human being. It gives me a fellowship where I no longer have to put up a sign that says, keep out. I don't have a closet. There's clothes in my closet now. I'm not in there, and I don't keep up the keep out sign to everybody else. And it happened because of one thing that my sponsor said right in the beginning. She said, Rick, you do not think your way into right action. You act your way into right thinking, and that's by taking the 12 steps. God bless you, and I will see you in Toronto next year.